All right, let's get this party started. Welcome everybody who's jumping into the webinar. We actually gonna need to figure out to launch the poll question. Can you do that, Victor, for us? And so as everybody jumps in, or I wonder if I will need to do that. There it is.
I see it.
All right, and so we have a poll question that you have never gotten in the history of wealth tech webinars. We are sure of that, because we're going to talk about hard conversations. And one of those is that conversation with our children about sex. So we're curious, how many, for those of you jumping into our conversation today, had that conversation with your parents, and how many of them just punted altogether and just left you to your own devices to learn how the world actually worked? And so feel free. And Victor, you can bring that back up here in a few minutes once we have everybody answering our poll questions. And as we go today, as everybody gets gathered up here, we'd love to get Q&A going at any point, anytime along the way. Feel free to fire questions at us. And sorry, Chris, you can't take the poll. You're a panelist. But we're gonna ask you directly. You're gonna get to share. Don't worry.
Okay.
As we go here, jump into the Q&A. Fire questions at us. And as we go, so we make this as an engaging back and forth as possible. And so wanted to throw out that to everyone. My name is Matt Morris. I'm going to kind of facilitate a little bit of the conversation as we get started, but out of the gate, let's get this going here. I'm going to bring up one other piece so I can see Q&A as you guys do that. Great. And so as we get started here, let's chat on difficult conversations. We have an awesome guest that is going to share here in a bit. We're going to have a good fireside chat around embracing tough conversations, specifically around loss. And studies have shown that the three hardest conversations to have are around money, are around incapacitation, death, and talking to kids about sex. And so we're going to learn more when we see the results of our poll, how well that has gone for all of you. But it's really the loss of these things and the fear of loss of capital, fear of loss of capacity and death and loved ones as well. And maybe the fear, I was thinking about this because I thought about it with my kids, when I've had to have these conversations. I was a good parent. I had the conversation. I embraced the hard conversation. But it was kind of like, when I go back, it's like a fear of loss of their innocence. You guys think that makes sense? It's like, oh man, it's like they have maybe this innocent view of the world, and here's how it actually works. Maybe that was the fear of loss, as we're going to talk about it today. And so avoiding these conversations is a real problem. And the reality is if you as advisors are not having these conversations, just like you're not talking with your kids about sex, then someone else is. And what is going to be the quality of that discussion if you aren't proactive about these hard conversations? And so we had an example we wanted to share of maybe not the highest quality conversation that might be had otherwise. And so I got a little video here from a movie called Mean Girls that isn't maybe the best source of information that we may get.
I guess I'll never know what I missed on that first day of health class.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise? Okay, everybody take some rubbers.
So is that the quality of insight and advice these conversations are going to be brought to
I guess I'll never
kids.
know what I missed.
Figure out how to stop this and go to the next slide. What is going to be the quality if you, the advisor, aren't the one comfortable talking about loss and putting it front? And so that is the connection between Nitrogen and Encore today that is going to be the focus. And so we have an amazing guest in Yohance Harrison. Thank you for joining us, a user of both the Encore platform and Nitrogen, who very much proactively talks with clients about loss. Say hello, Yohance.
Greetings, everyone.
And so he's going to lead a lot of the conversation. And then we have Chris Quant from Nitrogen. And Chris and I are going to go for a couple minutes here, give a high level overview if you're not familiar with Encore, if you're not familiar with Nitrogen, and help you understand our platforms. And then we're going to throw it over to that fireside chat with Yohance once we do that. So Chris, introduce yourself and kind of share us a quick overview on Nitrogen for everybody.
Yeah, for sure, Matt, and glad to be here and to be with you and Yohance. It's going to be a great conversation. Yeah, but I'm Chris. I'm on our advisor success team here at Nitrogen. Been here for about 8 years, and yeah, just excited. One, Matt, my dad did have that conversation with me. By the way, it was a guy's weekend away, and he put on some tapes or CDs or something like that, and we went through the. Anyway, yes,
Birds and the Bees. I forgot to ask Yohance when I introduced him. Yohance, did you get that conversation?
I did get the conversation. It was also the first time that my father handed me a beer. So they kind of went together. So now, unfortunately, though, I kind of associate the two. So, but yeah, we did.
Okay, I'm glad I didn't do that with my kids. Now they never want to have a beer with me.
I don't recommend that way. I don't.
For the rest of life, anytime your dad handed you a beer, you're like, "No, Dad, no, I don't want to. Let's not go there."
Or anyone for that matter. That's the other problem. And it was a Heineken. So for that reason, I don't drink Heinekens. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
That's fantastic.
Well, take us away, Chris.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my kids are right in that age too. So I don't know if I maybe start with the beers for me just so we can get through.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to think about it.
But yeah, Matt, if you want to roll to the next slide there, we'll just talk a little bit about Nitrogen here. For those that are like Nitrogen, maybe you've heard of us before. Riskalyze was our name for a long time, and now we're known as Nitrogen. Still same company, same heart, all that good stuff. But one of the things we like to say is, hey, it really is where advisors, and I'll be interested to hear Yohance's take on this, but we're starting the conversation with risk. So we invented this risk number, which is a quantitative way to find out how much risk an investor wants, how much they have in their portfolio right now, how much risk they need in order to meet those long-term goals. So in that, we have these subjective terms in our industry like moderate and conservative and aggressive, but those are subjective terms, again, which could mean something different to you than it does to me, than it does to the next person that walks into the room. So again, how do we create a through point, a talking point when we're talking about what our risk tolerance is? What is the risk of our portfolio? What does it look like over the long term? And again, we wrap that up in that conversation, what I like to call the core four. So Matt, if you want to head on to the next slide over there, if you're looking inside of Nitrogen, you'll see a little something like this, like how much risk does this investor want? Whether that's with a prospect, whether that's with a current client right now, we're having that conversation. We're starting that conversation around risk. So that's going through the client's risk number, finding that risk tolerance, and that is accomplished through that risk assessment, that risk questionnaire. Next is their portfolio. How much risk do they have right now? Just because I tell you how much risk I want, what I'm comfortable with, well, that's kind of half of the equation. Now I have to see how much I actually have and how do those numbers compare. So you can see how we're making that a bit more quantitative and really visual for folks to kind of quickly see and understand compared to what I say I'm comfortable with. What am I actually dealing with right now? Advisors can come in and use the proposed portfolio to say, all right, hey, here's how we can probably, and especially in that prospecting conversation, get you aligned using our proposal. Here's our model. Here's what we recommend to get you more in alignment through that should have. Here's what you have. Here's what we recommend you should have. And then what does that risk capacity look like over the long term? How much risk do you actually need in order to meet those long-term goals? And that's a high-level financial planning conversation, just saying, hey, over the long term, looking at this retirement map, are we taking on enough to make sure that we're meeting those goals and comfortably having our money last us all through our lifetime? And it really is a really great conversation to have that through line through what you want, what you have, and what we need for the long term. And Matt, you and I were talking a little bit about it before this, but You know, it really is, and I think in the context of our conversation today is, yeah, maybe we're talking, there's somebody in the household that is the primary manager of the money, really deals with all the finances. But when it comes to also the spouse, like this is a team game, like we're together. So we're using that risk number as that kind of for the household as well, not to just say, hey, maybe it's the primary person's number, but what is the spouse's risk number? How does that compare when it comes to managing the money? My wife and I, we both took the risk, went through the risk questionnaire, found our individual risk number. I'm a 74. The S&P 500 is about a 75 if you want to use that as a benchmark. So I'm close to there. And Matt, I don't know if I've told you this. So my wife went through it. She, as a hint, she got us a couple skydiving trip
Oh, wow.
for Christmas, last Christmas, couple skydiving thing. So let's go ahead and strap ourselves to somebody that we don't know and jump out of a perfectly good plane.
Yeah.
And she got it off of Groupon. So let's send that to the lowest bidder. So any guesses on her risk number there?
Yeah, she's ahead of you, maybe.
Yeah, it's 1 to 99, by the way, is the range.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's a 94. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
but it really helps inform our decision. Are we going to have our portfolios be all the way in the 90s? Are we going to be in the 70s? Maybe not necessarily, but it brings us both into the conversation with our advisor and really both gets us involved and active. So, you know, when things move on, because it's inevitable, things are inevitable. The market's going to go up, it's going to go down. As long as we both understand and know what the stakes are and what the conversation are, that is really helpful and helping us stick not
Yeah.
probably together financially and probably just
Yeah.
as a couple in general, but I don't know. I ain't jumping out of that plane. I'm going to tell you that. But then with our advisor kind of making a plan going forward and walking through that to completion. But man, I know like in the estate planning conversation that kind of similar themes are running through
Yeah.
there as well.
Yeah, and we'll let Johan share more on this, but one of the things we know is that it's a really high percentage. I've seen some studies up to 90% and 70 to 90% all of on wives that leave the advisor after their husband die. We know more likely the husband dies first. And what is it that you all as advisors have done to engage the spouse? Getting the risk number right involved in that risk tolerance is going to matter in a huge way to that spouse feeling like that advisor understands how to manage their money appropriately for them, but also the estate planning conversation, super rich when it is solving for that a lot of the wife who's often outlives the husband and their need. That we had surveyed our advisors recently that have been doing this, and 100% of them that took the survey said, I believe by doing estate planning, it's helping improve the retention of the spouse, my relationship with the spouse. And so this is a huge, and we'll let Johan speak to that too. But as we do this, and real quick, Chris, just while we're there, I'm in the 30s as a risk number.
Okay.
But I went
Okay.
skydiving 2 years ago. And so different kinds of risk. And so you don't want to lump me
Fair
right
enough.
in that category of high portfolio willingness for loss and risking life, or doing fun things like that.
You
And
also
so
ride, I know you ride dirt bikes too.
I do that too.
You're a guy
And
who's
so
out there. Yeah.
but when it comes to my portfolio, I don't have a high tolerance for loss. And so, so that's a whole nother way I look at the world. But this is what's fascinating, and especially for advisors willing to have these hard conversations and step into an estate planning conversation at depth and really deliver value in it. It's a huge opportunity because of this cognitive dissonance that exists. This was a survey from Merrill Lynch a few years ago on their advisors, and they asked, or their clients, they asked, how do you feel about somebody who passes on from this life without an estate plan in place? 88% of people said irresponsible, inconsiderate, and ignorant were words they used to describe that person who passes away without an estate plan. When they asked how many of you actually have an estate plan, 58% didn't have an estate plan. And so I don't think they would have described themselves that way, but that's the category of how they understand their own need for an estate planning. So there is a gap that people don't, who they want to have these conversations with and where they're comfortable. And right now their two options are, I can go DIY it with many software tools online and just do my own estate plan, but I'm going to have questions and who's there to make sure it's right and put this puzzle together. Does it actually accomplish what I want? And I like the price point of DIY, or I can go spend a lot of money. I can talk to a stranger about these things. And again, uncomfortable conversations that maybe isn't always the best experience. I spend a lot of money. I have to download everything from the start and with someone who's transactional in the relationship. And so that's not a great option either. So I procrastinate. 67% of people total don't have an estate plan, and many have estate plans that are out of date. And so it's really the technology and the advisor. And so this is where Nitrogen and Encore agree completely that you all as advisors are the hero here. You're stepping in, you're the hero for the client. You're helping them get through things that are hard for them to get through. And we're the tools that help you go and do your hero things. And so, but we both believe that the best experience is the technology in the hands of a great advisor. From an estate planning standpoint, that means things like visual estate plan summaries, easy to understand estate planning, where you can review with Encore a client's existing documents, upload them to us. We give you a visual summary back that makes it an easy conversation to talk about that existing document. We help you facilitate the experience without practicing law of helping them get their the documents they need in place, either updated or new documents in place. We help with filling in the funding gaps when you uncover issues within their estate plan. Maybe they've never put their property or their business ownership into the name of their trust. We help that happen on new documents, on existing documents. And then we enable you to keep documents up to date over time. This is a huge gap that exists in estate planning. People get a document done, they don't revisit it for years. Too many advisors just say, do you have one? Client says yes, and they go, moving on. And you're missing the opportunity to find out, is that document just like the financial plan, is their estate plan current and up to date? And so we enable you to do exactly that. This visual summary, just like the visual tools within Nitrogen that are incredible to make the complex easier to understand, we do that with the estate plan. This is the diagram that says, here's your document, 90% of what you need to know, that you don't have to search through a 70-page document to understand. This is a deliverable you should be providing from an estate planning conversation. We're a little bit unique in that we're a pay-as-you-go software. We do human review on every document. We're an estate planning team at Encore that is your estate planning back office that reviews documents for quality control, that's there for you. We're able to customize the documents to a greater degree. We let you facilitate the experience. And so if you're interested in estate planning and stepping into this gap, you'll be able, at the end here, we'll come back and discuss that a little bit more and give you an opportunity to learn more. But as we here throw it over to Yohance, Yohance had a great way to really think about conversations about loss. And this was the clip he suggested. And so I want to share one more movie clip with you as we throw it over to Yohance.
You hear that, Mr. Anderson? That is the sound of inevitability.
So Yohance, the train is coming. Loss is inevitable.
It's gonna happen.
Let's hear from you on your approach here.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chris. So excited to be with each and every one of you today. We appreciate you taking some time away from your clients so that you can learn ways to service them better. I am an advisor, so I get it. I'm taking time away from my practice as well for all of you and to have this conversation. And I think this is a great day to have the conversation, especially when it comes to uncomfortable conversations, because guess what? We don't have to talk about who's going to be president anymore. Conversation's over. Yep. The inevitability is here. It's here. The election day came and it went, and that's it. So we have until next year when you can vote for something probably locally. So sign up for that. 2 years for Senate and Congress and all that fun stuff, and then 4 years for president again. So it is here. And look what happened today. If there was ever a day to talk about risk with your clients, today is the day. Today is the day. We have a record day in the stock market. This is a great day to have a conversation with one of your top clients that is experiencing either the market going up or the market not doing, or excuse me, their accounts going up or their accounts not going up, today's a great day to introduce the risk conversation. What's interesting though is that I've found is that as financial advisors over the years, and this is for myself as well, it was very easy to talk about the risk conversation for me as an advisor. Why? Because I was so fortunate to start my career on September 12th, 2001.
Oh.
Made it really easy to talk about risk. Okay. Actually, we couldn't talk about it for like a month because the market was closed and open and it kept stopping the market and all this.
Wow.
Talking about risk was all I knew how to do. Now, fast forward a few years, in 2013, I lost my mother. In 2013, back up, 2011, my wife lost her grandmother who raised her. 2013, I lost my mother. 2017, I lost my father. 2017, she lost her grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
All four of them passed away without an estate plan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fortunately and unfortunately, my parents didn't have much. Didn't have to worry about probate, estate, that sort of thing. I did have to worry about writing some checks. I had to pony up the dough to help get my parents cremated and have a ceremony and all that fun stuff. I shouldn't call it fun. It wasn't fun. All that unfun stuff. My wife's grandparents, so I sat down with them and had a conversation about estate planning in 2010, and they didn't do anything about it. And then grandma passed away. I had the conversation with grandpa, we call him Poppy, had a conversation with him at least a dozen other times. And he passed away with his estate plan on his desk with Post-it notes on it with questions that he had about the plan that were left unanswered. His assets were in probate for 7 years.
Oh, geez.
Tens of thousands of dollars, back and forth to court, fights and disputes between the family that all could have been resolved. As a matter of fact, his questions weren't really questions. They were just comments. He could have signed it just as it was, and we could have avoided all of that.
Mm.
So that is where, for me, I decided, you know what? Actually, I had one more experience. I had experience with a client that had one of my first clients that I got back in 2001. She was on her deathbed in February of 2020. And I'm in the hospital with her, her son, an attorney, and a witness signing her estate plan a week before she passed away. And saved her son thousands upon thousands of dollars. Made it a very smooth transition of the estate. And guess what? All the money is still under my management. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
From those experiences, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just not. I needed to get uncomfortable, or excuse me, I needed to get comfortable with being uncomfortable with having those conversations. So kind of going back to the earlier thing we talked about with, the don't have sex thing. I have a son. He's 23. I did a better job of having the conversation with him, but I will tell you, I am fearful of having a conversation with my daughter. I'd rather just opt out of it. But as was stated earlier by Matt, if we don't have the conversation, someone else will. So if I want to be able to control any part, I won't say control, influence the narrative around there, my wife and I have to get really comfortable with having those uncomfortable conversations. So that's kind of high level of how I have gotten into these conversations of risk, not only from portfolios, but risk from the inevitability of the market's going to go down, the market's going to go up, the market's going to be flat. How can we have a common language of how we talk about it? And then one of these days, you are going to depart from this earth in a sociable sense. Okay. You're going to. The matter will still be there in some way, shape, or form, either in the ground or in a urn. But you're not going to be here. And when you're not, do we want to leave behind what do we call it? Irresponsibility.
Irresponsible, inconsiderate, and ignorant.
Ignorant. And the truth is, you know what it is? It's ignorance. Most times it's really ignorance. And so I find, to speak of risk numbers, Alicia, my wife, is currently studying for her CFP. She's been in it for about 1.5 years. Her risk number before she started studying for the CFP was like a 40. And I had to say, babe, what are you doing? 40? No, come on, that's ridiculous. You're going to have to take on some risks. You're not saving enough money. No, you're going to have to be at least a 75, 80. Now that she's more educated, her risk number is an 80. Okay. So education can lead to action that's in the right direction because we're able to pull off that veil of ignorance. So I don't want to just chat at everyone the whole time. I know it's supposed to be a fireside chat, but I kind of held the marshmallow over the flames for a little while. So it's getting a little crispy.
I have a question on there. I guess it's really your personal experience that has driven your conviction in wanting to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so in doing that, how are you seeing, and how has that changed for you? Were these conversations a lot harder in the earliest days, or is it a vulnerability thing? Because it seems you have the story that maybe opens up some vulnerability. And so talk about that and how that plays out in these conversations.
Yeah, no, I will say, if you don't have a story of your own, use mine. However, we all have a story. We all have a parent or grandparent or aunt or uncle that is no longer with us. Okay. If you don't know the story of the estate, go find out what it was and tell that story. Because either it's a good story where, yep, estate planning was done, everything was smooth, we got our inheritance, everything was great. We got to focus our time on loving on each other and talking about the great times for the person that's no longer here. Or was it nothing was in order? We had to go through probate. There were people fighting over things. I still don't talk to my uncle, or I don't talk to my brother. Though we all have those stories. So I would encourage you to, if you don't have a story, borrow mine, but lean into that and just have the conversation with clients. So what I started doing early on was just sharing my story and just sharing what I had to go through burying my parents, what Alicia had to go through burying her grandparents, the aftermath of it. And then just posing the question to the client, okay, we can't avoid people from fighting, but we can reduce the amount of stress and the lack of paperwork that needs to be in place. There's some of those things that we can put in place. Are you open to having that conversation and putting in place? And at the end of the day, it's just like either you're going to have a plan or you're not. And if you're working with me, Mr. and Mrs. Client, we're going to have a plan. So let's talk about how you can do it. And it goes back to your slide. You can do it yourself, which how's that working out for you so far? Okay. I have a partner that we can partner with, and I can help you with, instead of DIY, it'd be DIT, do it together. Okay. Or I can team you up with an attorney and they can do it for you. DIF, you. We should probably just leave it DIF. But no matter which route you go down, you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. So yes, it was leaning into my personal experience and just asking the client about their experiences. After that, Matt, it became a word of mouth thing because I happen to be an advisor. Those of you that have heard me speak at some of the other places, I talk a lot about, or other stages, I talk a lot about leaning into referral marketing. So a lot of my clients know each other. So all it takes is one to say, oh, yeah, I just got my estate plan signed. Or, wait, I'm in your estate plan? Yo, you didn't talk to me about an estate plan. I'm like, wait, we're not on that step yet. We're getting there. Well, so-and-so did theirs. I need to do mine. So it actually made it so the conversation was happening for me. And I also did some active, proactive marketing. I sent out a survey to all of my clients that I knew didn't have an estate plan. And I just asked them, do you have an estate plan? Do you want to do something about it? And a lot of them were just saying, yes, I want to have a conversation. I want to figure out what we need to do, what my options are, et cetera. So once I created the conversation, it just never stopped. And I made sure that as part of my financial planning workflow, the check mark is in there. Do you have an estate plan? Do we need to revisit it? Okay. And for those that do, if yes, do we need to revisit it? And I allow the clients to answer the question, and then we take the action from there.
Love that. Yohance, early in my career, the advice I was given was get your experience cheap. So if you can learn from somebody else's experience, like do that and then make new mistakes and go from there. And I think you've alluded to it a little bit here in this last answer here, but can you let us know how, like, especially if you're stepping into those conversations for the first time, how do you walk into those conversations? Is it you have bullet points that you're going to hit? And again, I'm thinking about the estate planning, but also kind of that risk conversation as well. How do you walk into those conversations?
So I like to begin with asking questions that I already know the answer to, but I just want the client to affirm it. So, so let's start with the risk questionnaire. So I would say to you, so Chris, looking at all your portfolios here, we've got your 401k, your IRA, that Robinhood account that you've been playing around with. Do you have a method to measure your risk across all of these portfolios? What's the client's answer going to be? 9 times out of 10, it's a no.
No idea.
Or they're going to respond with a question. What do you mean?
Right.
Okay. So let's say it goes with the what do you mean? Well, I know you have a goal of retiring in 15 years. Are you confident that the risk that you're taking in your portfolios is going to get you to that goal? Okay. More than likely, the answer is going to be no. And if it's a yes, like, great, that's probably overconfidence. Awesome. Show me.
Yeah.
Okay. And typically they can't. So from there, the conversation with the client is, look, I want to create a baseline for us to be able to have a conversation, not just about your risk tolerance, but I really want to talk about your loss tolerance. Because that's what this risk conversation is really about. This risk, that's the fancy financial advisor talk. No, let's talk about your emotional ability to tolerate downturns in the market. Okay. Because I do not have the capacity to answer the phone when you call freaking out because the market has fallen by 30%. If that's the relationship we're going to have, Chris, I'm sorry, you have the wrong advisor. Okay. So I want to make sure that we're on the same page and create a common language. So I want to introduce you to something known as a risk number. Okay. You've probably seen something like this before. If you have a 401k, if you have an employer, if you use Fidelity, Empower, T. Rowe Price, if you use any of them, they tried to get you to go through some sort of process like this early on to figure out what portfolio is best for you. Maybe you paid it a lot of attention, maybe you didn't, but we're going to develop this common language. Okay, so I'd like you and your wife to each take this quick risk questionnaire. Don't worry, there's no wrong answers. And if I find that you need a little bit more financial education after you take them, we're going to talk about it. So that I just, like I said, lean into to ask a question I already know the answer to. Okay. Get agreement to let's build this common language, change the word risk to loss. And then I take them through the questionnaire. Now, after they do the questionnaire, that's where the fun begins. Because then I link all their accounts and I say, gee, Chris, you said you're a 74, but that Robinhood account's scoring a straight up 99. Talk to me about that. And you're like, crypto. I'm like, okay, well, you're taking on a lot more risk than you said you were comfortable with it. Talk to me about that. It's not wrong, but talk to me about that. Okay. At what point, so what if this portfolio went down by 50%, which anybody that has a risk 99 portfolio, you can go in history and find a time where it went down by 50%. Trust me on that. Just do the data. It's out there. Okay. Let's say that happened again. How would you feel? What are you expecting from me as your financial advisor in that situation? I want you to tell me to get out. Well, no, you're risk 99. Actually, that means you want to get in. You want to buy more. Oh, no, well, okay. So now we can talk about where we have this commonality so that my phone doesn't ring at 8:30. And well, for me, 8:30 Central Time when the market opens and it's down 10, 15, 20%. I'm sorry, I'm not answering the phone. I'm not available. I just can't. So we have to set these baselines first. And don't worry, Chris, we're going to check in. I'm going to send you a two question quiz once a quarter, just as a check-in, just 2 questions. Okay. Based on the answer to those questions, we may make some adjustments, but other than that, we are going to do everything we can to make sure that your portfolios are in alignment with what you said is your risk tolerance or loss tolerance, and that is also in alignment with helping you reach your financial goals. That's the conversation. So I think I answered it more for you over there at Nitrogen. Matt, did I leave you out at all?
No, no, this is, hey, I'm a former Riskalyze guy. And so in my past life. And so I'm a huge
Is it
fan
everyone these
of
days?
that. There's a few of us out there. And so, but hey, we're solving the new problem on estate planning too. And so, but I have it in my bones, the value of what Nitrogen brings to that, the simplicity and the ability to understand, making the complex easy to understand and not having to do it in a way, as you just articulated that conversation, you didn't have to pull up standard deviation and explain to them what that is in Sharpe ratios to help them understand how you're managing that risk. You kept the conversation, and that is the value. What and so I'll ask you to speak to this is of you as the advisor taking very complex things that Nitrogen does under the hood, and you deliver a simple, easy to understand conversation. How does that play in when it's a estate planning conversation, as you've seen it, when that is additionally overwhelming, difficult to understand, intimidating, as well when it comes to the client's feel of this heavy conversation? How do you lighten it? How do you make it easy to understand and deliver the experience there that they're looking for?
So I'll start with lightening the conversation. And it kind of goes back to just sharing my experience. I think when I become vulnerable and share with clients my experience, that automatically takes some of the weight off of them because I'm taking it all on. I'm reliving losing my parents. I'm reliving losing my wife's grandparents. And so that vulnerability, I think, takes some of the weight off of them so that I can have permission to then say to them, all right, look, you're doing a great job of accumulating all of this stuff. How do we make sure that it goes to your heirs the way that you want it to? And we can reduce or completely eliminate the risk of your assets going through probate. Are you open to us having that conversation? And I found that that's kind of the sales 101 language on it is the, are you open?
Interesting.
Because they say, oh, I'm closed. No one really says that. Now they may say, I really don't want to talk about that right now. Okay, tell me more. Well, and they'll open up, and even though they said they don't want to talk about it, they'll typically start talking about it. The other thing that I found to be fun is to tell stories about individuals other than yourself where it didn't work out. And the best stories out there are the stories about celebrities.
There you go.
I'll bring up Prince. I'll bring up Aretha Franklin. I'll bring up my alma mater with Martin Luther King. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of people that had millions and still didn't have the conversation. And so now we, as the general public, know everything that's going on because of that. And so I like to say to clients, look, I know you're doing pretty good, but I mean, you're not doing Prince good. I mean, she's doing okay. So I don't want you to have to go through that. I want to be able to help you put the documents in place so that you can, again, reduce the likelihood of probate, reduce the likelihood of things not going to the right place. And I'll also joke around, especially when I'm dealing with spouses, because I've seen this happen in real life. I actually tell this story very often. So I'll tell it to all of you. And by all means, borrow this story, use it yourself. Say, hey, there's an advisor I know. So back in the day, about a decade ago, one of my this is after I kind of went through the things with my parents. So I started to tell my clients, hey, bring in all of your accounts and your estate plan. We're going to do a full beneficiary review. So this was back in the days of meeting in the office with the big projector on the screen, and I would pull up everything on my computer or hand them the keyboard and all that fun stuff. So have a client that's we're going through the beneficiary review. and they were supposed to update their beneficiaries on their own. And then I was just checking off to make sure they were right and updating the financial plan. So turned to the wife. I said, ladies first. Turn to her. She logs into her 403B. She looks, and she has the husband as the beneficiary. And I say, all right, let's go ahead and add the kids as a contingent beneficiary. She goes, all right, great. We'll add the kids. So she's done, and then we give it to the husband. But when we turn to the husband, his bald head is now covered in sweat. And I didn't know if it was just the temperature in the room. Like, okay, this is weird. So I handed the keyboard, and I was like, Fidelity, right? And he was kind of blanked out for a minute. He's like, yeah, Fidelity. So Fidelity net benefits, like, all right, here you go. Go ahead and log in, and we'll update yours. So first he pulls the, I don't know if I know my password. And the wife was like, oh, it's in your phone, or not in phone, wherever she had it, somewhere where they kept their passwords. I know, here, I know what your password is. And she types it in. And this guy has $1 million in this 401k. Pulls it up. I have the mouse, so I can go to beneficiaries. I know where I'm going. Beneficiaries open. The beneficiary was not his wife, nor was it his ex-wife. It was his girlfriend.
I knew you were going there.
20 years ago.
Oh,
Crazy.
Gosh.
I looked at him, I looked at her, and I said, I think I need to go get some coffee.
He just bailed.
Walked
Nice
out the
call.
room. As I'm leaving, she said, you better hope I don't kill him while you're gone. And I said, don't do it yet. Change the beneficiary first. And walked out.
Yeah, exactly.
So I came back in, of course, brought him some paper towels so he can clean up his sweat. And she's just sitting there, arms crossed. And I look on the screen, I see it's been changed. I was like, it's been updated. And I say, is everything okay? And he said, I've been meaning to do that, and I just never got around to it.
Wow.
I was afraid I was going to have to get her signature or something. And I said, well, fortunately, Fidelity didn't know that you're married. You had never told him that. So that person you just had listed as friend, it was a name. Because I was like, oh, who's good? I left that part. I was like, oh, who's Sheila? And she answered, Sheila, his high school sweetheart. I was like, whoa, it just got uncomfortable. But the likelihood of that happening to a client is low. But to have the conversation, like, when's the last time you looked at all your beneficiaries? Okay. I can't tell you how many times I've come across a beneficiary review where it's blank. And the client, oh, I know I filled it out. I know it. I'm like, you probably did. But it's not there.
Yep.
So let's update it, and then let's put this backup in place, that this trust, this will that also says what's supposed to happen with your assets. So I find that stories and asking if you're open can help lower, and not just stories about your own or their stories, but also stories about prominent people in the world that we know, to bring that into the conversation, to also make your clients feel like this is normal. Like this is a normal process that people get to go through. And I think another thing that I'm going to add now that we've had this session with the title of this, I'm going to start adding to my agenda some, having an uncomfortable conversation, and just start off with like, look, we're not going to talk about sex. Okay. That's what we're not doing. But we are going to talk about
Have fun
loss.
with it. Yes.
Okay? We are going to talk about your law. What happens if, so that we have a plan. And we can then implement that plan, and you can focus more on loving each other, missing the loved one, and not, oh wait, where's their money? Where's this? Where's that? How are we going to do this? It's all in this document right here.
Yeah. Boy, that'll get their attention on the meeting invite, though. We're not going to talk about this.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about.
I need to respond to this email.
Yeah.
Get a
Hard
response
conversations. This is one. We'll if we have time, we'll get to this.
Yeah, here you go.
I love
Indeed.
it. Yohance, you said I love what you said there about risk and loss, and we're having a conversation around loss, and whether that's in the market, and we know the markets go up and down, and that's inevitable, and it is inevitable. Death and taxes is one thing that we're never going to get out of here. That old saying going there.
At least not in America anyway.
Well, yeah, not here anyway. Yeah. I'm curious, when you're having those conversations from a deliverable standpoint, as you're prepping clients, as you're setting expectation on both sides, on the estate planning and also kind of in the nitrogen conversation, is there a lot of documentation? Does it seem like it's an overwhelm of paperwork, or how do you set the expectations of the process and something that they can take with them moving forward?
So is this where I do the shameless plug of the new nitrogen reports?
You
So
can
there's
do it if
that.
you want. It's not like I was trying to set you up for that, but generally
So
interested for advisors,
yeah.
deliverables.
So starting with nitrogen, when we're having the conversation about risk and loss, what I've found is that, especially those that tend to have a larger appetite for risk or loss, is that they'll tend to get the Superman mentality of, it's no big deal, we'll just make it back. So I found that one of the most helpful tools that we have inside that nitrogen provides as a deliverable is the report that shows if this were to happen again. Because I find that our clients have a very short-term memory. Like most clients do not remember their equity portfolio dropping by 35% in March of 2020. Okay. They don't. By the way, I had one phone call. And I knew she was going to call. She's the one all the time. Okay. And I know you're just going to tell me. I'm like, what am I going to tell you? So, but because of that short-term memory, I think being able to put in front of them to say, hey, based on what you've chosen here or where you are, here's some of the things if we experience them again. And by the way, we're probably never going to experience a financial crisis again. History does not really repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So the next, great failure of the markets is going to be another reason, and we don't even know what it is yet. We don't. Okay. And we won't know until after we're already in it and it's already happening and it's like too late. Okay. Is there going to be someone that gets it right? Yes. But we still don't know who that is either. So that is one of my favorite deliverables that nitrogen has to again help the client create a more in-line memory of what did happen. Because here's the other thing. Let's talk about the financial crisis.
Yeah.
That was what, 2009? Most clients that went through that have somewhere between 25 to 50% less money than they have today. So from their loss tolerance, it wasn't as devastating. It's one thing when you go from 100,000 to 50,000. It's different when you go from 1 million to 500,000. Yeah. Psychologically, going back to, I'm a behavioral financial advisor.
Yep.
The behaviors, the psychological impact of that is very different. Okay. So that's also part of the reason why checking in and making sure that you're in alignment, or you know what, that might be the right thing for them to go through, but making sure they understand that this is what could happen. So I find that to be one of the great deliverables that are there. And just the check-ins, the two questions. So the two questions on the check-in is how are you feeling about the markets and how are you feeling about your financial situation?
That's
okay.
Financial future. Yep.
Yep. That's the two questions. So having that, getting in front of them and then being able to get back in front of me, I can pick up the phone when I see somebody do anxious on both. I'll pick up the phone and call them. Hey, what's going on? People are getting laid off. Okay, let's have the conversation. What might that mean? What would that look like for you? Do we need to make adjustments? And I end up telling them, don't, at least not to your 401k. You're not, unless you're not being retired, we're going to leave this alone, but help to get them back to understand that, things are going to be okay. Yeah. As far as the simplicity on the estate plan, unfortunately, estate planning is full of a lot of legalese and stuff that I can't even speak to. But I heard something. Matt, did you say this? Or maybe Mike Bennett said it. I think it was Mike. Mike said, Mike is one of the partners there at where are you? Encore. He said, on this estate plan, 75% of it won't even, hopefully 75% of this won't even apply to your situation.
Yep, exactly right.
But it's in there just in case.
Yep.
So I tell the clients, look, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions and I don't know how you're going to die. I don't know if it'll be quick. I don't know if it'll be a long, slow, drawn out process. So some of these questions may never come into play. But we're going to ask them anyway, so we can at least have a solution for whomever is there that's going to speak for you. So with the Encore, whenever we're going through the estate planning, we will start with, once the client says, yes, I want to do it, we send them an estate planning contract, and we also send them that says, hey, you're going to authorize us to intake this information for you. But we also just go ahead and send them a 2-pager to list the questions. And when they see that, they're like, this is it. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's all we have to, that's it. These are the questions. Yeah. The longest ones are the medical questions. Everything else is pretty simple. But then they get the document like, oh, wow, that turned into 100 pages. Like, yep, 75% of it, I hope, is BS, meaning will never apply to your situation. And more than likely, that's going to be true. Okay. But just in case, we have the document in place. So, and then the Matt alluded to it earlier, which I just started using and I love, is that visual estate plan. So we put on the first 2 pages of our estate plan is the visual estate plan, and then we use eMoney for planning. We put a list of all of their known assets. So that's also where estate plan has been helpful. Clients will look at that like, oh, you left off my Merrill account. I'm like, you're what? Oh, I've got a little account at Merrill. Define little. That's about 100,000. Oh, okay. Typing that in now. You think I should consolidate it? I mean, yes, you should. Paperwork's on the way.
No doubt. No doubt.
So that's also been helpful. I've only had one client get pissed off about me prying in deeper into her financials. And here's what's interesting. It's the mother of the same Merrill client, which is funny. It's the mother. And we started asking her, we did the estate plan, did the intake, and we started asking her more about her assets. Okay, we know you own a home because your son told us. We know you have an annuity of some sort. How much is in that annuity? Do you just have one? Do you have any other IRAs? Do you have it? And at part of it, she says, this feels invasive. I'm like, it's for your estate plan. Well, my son already knows where everything is. Great. That's why we're going to put it in writing. She's the only one that became very closed off as I was going through that. But I realized why. It's because she's not my financial planning client. I would already know these answers to your financial planning client. Now, happy ending to that story. I called the son and said, hey, I think I might have ruffled your mom's feathers a little bit. We were asking her about where her stuff is, et cetera. She called back about a week later. I am so sorry. Is there anything else that you all need to know? I just, I talked to my son, and anything you need to know. I called him back. I was like, what did you tell your mom? I told her to tell you everything, even the things she doesn't tell me. I was like, oh, well, good. And so he has an experience. Actually, it's his wife had an experience with her father, died unexpectedly from a accidental gunshot wound. And everything was a financial mess for a long time. And so that is their kind of shared experience. And his mother, unfortunately, her health's not doing great. So he knows that the day is sooner rather than later. And he's the only child. He's like, he's got a kid on the way himself. He's like, that's the last thing that I want to do is have to worry about where her money is, how I'm going to pay her bills, et cetera, et cetera. I want everything done. So being that the holidays are coming, for those of you, and Matt will mention this, if you want to get started in estate planning, I tell my clients all the time, it's a great gift to give to your parents or to give to your kids.
Oh, absolutely. So you just mentioned something that was interesting. It's kind of the effect of this, that in that case, uncovering assets, we hear it from our advisors all the time that in that conversation, they find assets of, let's get the beneficiary designations right on your accounts. What else is out there? And when you're talking estate planning, that guard is down, that I might have those held away things that you aren't today managing. That's one example of kind of the benefits, I think, of doing the estate planning side, but just overall too, to that leaning into the loss conversations, being vulnerable, and being proactive about these conversations versus reactive. What other net effects, kind of as the close on as we close out this conversation, what are the positive effects? How do you think that differentiates you as an advisor? What are the things you see as a bottom line impact that other advisors would benefit from hearing on doing this equals these benefits to my practice?
So I'm gonna tell a quick story. So one of the questions I ask in the estate planning process is when someone says who they want to name as their financial power of attorney. So Matt says Chris, and I'll say, okay, great. All right, we're through the end. So Matt, does Chris know that you selected him as your financial power of attorney? You can say no, Matt. Okay. I think he probably should. Okay. Now, you haven't signed it yet, so let's get it all reviewed and everything. But once we get that done, let's get an introduction so that I can have a conversation. So we can have a conversation with Chris so that he understands what that means and he knows how to reach me if something goes wrong. Are you okay with that?
Yeah,
so I did that with a client, and she had named her mom. And she was on a Zoom just like this. And so I said that line to her. And She said, "Mom," and she's like yelling over the computer. I didn't know she was at her mom's house. Actually, I'm wrong. She wasn't at her mom's house, but I'll get to the story of that later. And mom comes over and said, "Mom, this is my financial advisor. You're my power of attorney. I want to make sure you all know each other." And she said, "Oh, that's great. You know, I think I need to do an estate plan too." I was like, "Well, let's do it." And so she sat down. I was like, "Oh, not right now. I need to send you some paperwork and the pre-work session." She was like, "Yeah, Mom, you can't do it right now." And she said, "Well, I also need to be the power of attorney for my mother." I was like, "Oh, who's her power of attorney right now?" And she says, "Mom." They were actually at grandma's house. So she turns the camera around and grandma's sitting in her knitting chair and she's knitting. And she's like, "Yeah, I haven't updated any of my documents since my husband died. And yeah, we probably need to update them. So do you need to know who I need to put right now?" "No, I got to send you some paperwork first. We'll get it done." So one client's estate plan turned into 3 clients' estate plans just because I asked if I can get introduced to the financial power of attorney. So that is an unintended consequence of actually leaning into this conversation and wanting to be a part of the process. You want your phone, if something happens to your client, you want your phone to ring. Okay. So that they can then coordinate with you, because hopefully you're the one managing the majority of the assets.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yep. And the depth of that conversation, I know you charge a planning fee for those estate plans. So that's revenue into your firm. And those are potential new opportunities with managing assets. And now you've started the conversation sometimes on estate planning that leans into a portfolio review and where Nitrogen steps into that. And so all these things work together. And so it kind of cool wraps it up with where the benefits of both of the tools and that Chris, you and I get to represent in partnership with advisors like Yohance can make that bottom line difference to you in your practice, which we know that's a net effect of you helping and serving clients at the end of the day. And so this is awesome stuff to share. And as I was going to bring this up, if you guys can see my the Advisor's Guide to Estate Planning podcast, because we've done a podcast where we just talk about, we interview advisors that are doing estate planning, that are leaning into these hard conversations and say, how do you do what you do? And so Yohance is one of them. He's got a bunch of other great insights he provides there, but we have a wide variety of different advisors that work in different ways that share how they do what they do in this topic, how they avoid practice of law, how they charge for estate planning, what the effects of what they do and how they do that. So that's a resource we wanted to just bring up to you if you wanted to learn more about that piece. And before I go, Victor, too, if you can throw up the poll for us, we want to make sure as we wind this up, what was the poll answers on how many people got to see it? So can you all see that there? So we got what, 30% that of course had that conversation. 50% said no, thank goodness. And what is that? Another 21%. And so awesome. And thanks for participating in our silly poll. I don't know, there's got to be some sociology aspect that we could understand better there, but that was a fun way to engage, hopefully, with you all. We wanted to throw out the next poll real quick for you, that if you're interested in getting a demo of EncorEstate or Nitrogen or both, answer that poll real quick for us, and we can make that'll get marked within the data out of this webinar that we can reach back out and we can help schedule something like that. But we wanted to throw out on this last slide, EncorEstate, we're willing to allow you engage with us. We're a free platform. You don't pay anything to create an account at EncorEstate, but we'll give you 50% off their first visual plan summary if you upload a document to us, or you want to do your own will, or your own trust. We do a lot of advisors. So if this is a conversation you've been putting off with your own spouse, hey, let's jump in. Let's get your own trust done at EncorEstate. We can do that. When you sign up, if you use that Lost Webinar affiliation code, that will trigger that 50% discount. Chris, do you want to do close us out on Nitrogen?
Yeah, for sure. And we'd love to have a conversation with you at Nitrogen, hello@nitrogenwealth.com. We also put the phone number up there, and you can also request a demo if this is the first time that you have ever heard of Nitrogen, want to find out more about it. If you go to nitrogenwealth.com, if you scroll down to the bottom there, if you're wanting to learn more from the training side, we have a customer page. You can click on customers and see all of our training resources. So I know we've got some questions there in the chat of kind of how we're using Nitrogen with other integrations with platforms as well. So lots of training resources for you if you're already using Nitrogen, or if you're interested in finding out more, nitrogenwealth.com, request a demo, and we'd love to talk to you more about it.
Cool. Thanks for doing that. And Yohance, man, you're just a great conversation. And what I always take away every time I'm reminded, I have conversations with you on just stories. You are a great storyteller. And that's a craft that you have, and a strength that you have, and how I see you as you describe your interactions with your clients and around this is these stories are really impactful. They show vulnerability on your part, which I think helps the client at the end of the day open up and become more vulnerable, because you have, and the power of stories in what you bring to both for other advisors to learn, steal your stories. That's generous of you, as well as helping your clients in that context from real world experience. So really grateful to you. You're generous with your time for sharing with advisors and sharing your use of our platforms. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
This was fun.
That'll wrap us up, everybody. Thanks for taking the time. Have a great afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.